Can you remember a sort of a defining moment in them early days that got you into the gambling, and
Yeah,
one of the things that started the problems?
yeah. So listen, there's only so much time you can sit in your digs. Obviously playing computer games, flicking over TV channels, and you get bored and you think to yourself, do you know what am I going to do for the next 7 or 8 hours before I go to bed? So I used to walk to McDonald's of all places to go and get a McFlurry in the evening. And on the way back, I started to find my way into Coral Bookmakers. 16 years old, 2 years younger than the national legal limit. And they would say to me, listen, have you got ID? And I'd just fob it off and say, I've given it to the lady last week. And they would let me carry on. So I
Yeah,
started doing it purely out of boredom. But as a footballer at the time, I was massively competitive, as you can imagine. So every time I placed the bet, my heart was going like the clappers. And I thought to myself, Jesus Christ, this is unbelievable, this feeling that I'm getting. And I wanted more of it. So I was only earning £50 a week, losing my £50 a week, ringing my mum up as soon as I got out of the shop and saying to her, I bought a pair of trainers or a tracksuit. Can you help me out? She would transfer me some over, and I'd go and lose hers. And then sometimes the following morning, I'd wake up and think, what have I done? I can't
mm,
afford to get the bus to training. So I used to just skip training, make up excuses, turn my phone off when the physio used to call me. And then I'd get punished for it the next day. Sometimes I'd leave for training at 4:30 in the morning and walk 3 hours to get there, just to make sure I got there because I didn't have £1.20 for the bus. So yeah, it was some dark days, walking in the pissing rain, I suppose, going to training at 4:45 in the morning.
wow, yeah. And what type of things was it you were gambling on? Was it like the roulette machines and those type of things?
Yeah, so it gave me like instant response from doing the roulette. Obviously, you got to wait 12 seconds or something for an outcome.
Yeah,
Horse racing, dog racing was the same. Football matches used to last too long for me. I wanted sort of instant reaction stuff. So waiting 90 minutes for a football match at the beginning when I was earning £50, I didn't bother too much. But yeah, the screens in the bookmakers, obviously the fixed odds betting terminals, they got me straight away. Was completely hooked. And then with the success that came with football, I had the money to do it and the time to do it. I felt like I had the knowledge to beat the system when I used to bet on sport. And the fact that I was competitive every time I lost the bet, I thought, you know what, I'm going to make sure I win the next one. And that's a danger in itself.
so when you get that first sort of decent money contract, instead of spending the same amount of betting and having more on in your pocket, you were just then spending more on the betting.
Yeah, my disposable income limit each month was, after a couple of years of being in the youth team, was quite good once I'd signed my professional contract. But I started betting more than I could afford, and that's when it becomes an issue. I knew I had an issue, but at the time, I knew I was getting paid again in the next few weeks, a large sum of money, I suppose, for a young lad, and I didn't feel like I needed to stop, because obviously the money I was earning, it would always get me through. But if I'd have stopped sooner, it would probably change my life completely. How it's shaped now, how my career went, possibly would have been different. But it's one of those things I'll never know. I can't really sort of live on that too much because I need to start moving forward again.
Yeah, of course. And in that period, you actually had quite a lot of short-term loan moves and bounced a few between a few different clubs. What was that like at the time?
Yeah, so the kind of guy I wasn't the best drinker in the world. I went on a night out when I was sort of 17, 18, and I got punched in the jaw and it broke my jaw. So I went into training on the Monday morning. Steve Coppell was the manager, good old Scouse guy. And he basically sat me down and he said, listen, Scott, I've not been happy with the way that you've been acting. He said, I've had to discipline you for shooting players with BB guns in the training ground, something you just don't do. Um, he said, now you're sat here in my office with a broken jaw. He said, what's going to happen is that you're going to go out on loan for the whole of next season because I don't want to see you at the training ground. So I had no choice in where I went, and I went to Aldershot Town. And I remember signing for them, and I felt like a kid in amongst men because I was still young. And when I got on the team bus for the first time, I thought, how do I fit in here? How do I sort of mix? Who do I sort of sit with? Where do I sit? And the captain called me up from down the back of the bus and said, listen, do you want to play poker? And I was like, yeah, of course I do. Didn't have a clue what the rules of the game were, but fast forward a few hours, I'd lost £2,000 on my first trip. And that was
Yeah,
£2,000 on like an IOU sheet. So it wasn't in cash because I didn't have
yeah,
cash on me. I was only on 400 quid a week. So I went home. I said to my parents that I'd made a mistake, that I gambled and I'd lost £2,000. I asked them to help me out. They wouldn't help me out, but I knew how my mum functioned. So I went upstairs and I went on a payday loan website. printed off the sheets, and I left a piece of paper on the downstairs dining table. It was a £6,800 loan to pay back £2,000. The following day, my mum approached me and she said, "Listen, like, what are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to get a loan out." The day after that, she gave me £2,000 in an envelope and said, "Don't gamble again." But I didn't realise I'd go on to lose almost £250,000 more. So I knew that in the early days that I needed to stop. My mum tried to help me stop. But yeah, moving to a new club at sort of like 19 years old was very, very difficult because I felt like I needed to fit in. And that's what I turned to, was gambling.
And looking back now on that experience, if you approached that player, assuming it was a senior player, was it, and you said, "Listen, I'm in trouble here. I can't pay that." What do you think the reaction to that would have been? Do you think it was loan or nothing, or do you think they would have been understanding?
Yeah, the player that I actually owed the money to was 37 years old. So for me, it was, "Listen, I look up to you. You're a senior player. You've had a great career. I owe him that money." And it was a proper debt. It wasn't just
Yeah,
a fob it off, like, "Don't worry about it." We played cards seriously. We played it for hours, and people used to get quite irate if they weren't winning, or if they had some bad beats in poker. So I knew I needed to pay it. I didn't ever think about not paying it. And for my own pride as well, I think I had to pretend I could pay it, because as a young lad, that ego tells you that you have to obviously put on a front to everyone else that you have got the cash in your account.
yeah.
But I didn't. I didn't have anywhere near that money. So yeah, no, I didn't even think about not paying him.
I actually remember that older shot team that you were part of, and it was actually a highly successful time for you in your career, wasn't it? At older shot.
Yeah, yeah. So we won the league that year, but there was so much stuff that I went through that season as a young lad that I just didn't speak out about. And the first time that I cried in years was actually in my manager's office. So I was sat at my girlfriend's house one day and I got a phone call from my best mate, and he said, "Listen, my mum's gone missing." So he said, "Can you come and help me find her? Can you come and help me search?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And she was suffering with mental health issues. And she was like a second mum to me, and my mum was like a second mum to him. So it was a real tight knit group. So I went around his house and we saw some things in the kitchen that we wish we hadn't seen, but we knew we were in trouble. We had to go down to the hospital immediately. We went down to the hospital that night. We went to look for his mum. We couldn't find her. And 20 to 5 in the morning, the police were still looking. They came round to my parents, knocked on the door, and said, "Listen, sorry to inform you, we found the body of your mum, and it's not good news." And this was one of the hardest situations I've ever been in my life. One of the most upsetting. I went to training the next day, and I didn't speak to anyone about what had happened. I didn't speak to my manager. But he pulled me in a few days later and said, "Listen, Scott," he said, "I've seen a change in attitude in your behaviour. You've been quite quiet." And he said, "What's going on?" And for the first time in years, I broke down. I started crying, and I told him what had happened a few days earlier. And he couldn't believe it. And he said, "Listen, go and have a few days off, go and recover, like, get your mind sorted." But that's just one of the things that you hide in football, because you don't feel like you can go in and tell people what's happened. You don't feel like you can tell people the truth. All of these things that as a young footballer you don't get prepared for, or you don't know how to act, but then you go out there on a Saturday and try to do the right thing. And that's really, really tough.
And I suppose as well, the environment you were in for what you was essentially your day job, being a footballer, it's such a masculine environment, and it's so much banter goes around, and you're in the changing rooms, and it probably didn't feel to you like the place to open up to anybody as well. But it showed you when you spoke to them. Was it Gary Waddock at the time, the manager?
Yeah,
Yeah, that
he's
obviously. Yeah.
yeah, he's an incredible guy. Got a lot of respect for him. Really get on with him. It's quite ironic that my last ever professional club, he was manager and he released me. And after that, I
Really?
didn't get another club. Yeah, but he'd signed me four times previously before that. But it just shows what happened to my career and how I'd kind of changed as a player. I wasn't the player that I once was. And for him to sign me 4 times and then be the guy to release me out of professional football, it kind of spoke volumes. Because I knew that I needed to sort of buck up my ideas about which direction my life was heading, because I was a complete mess at Oxford United at the time when he released me.
So after you went back after your loan spells to Reading, was there opportunities to join clubs permanently before that? Were Aldershot keen to take that permanent, or did you fancy
Yeah,
chances of making it at Reading still at that stage?
yeah. So there was sniffs. There was a bit of an interest apparently about going to Everton. There was sniffs about going to Bristol City on a longer term contract or more money. But none of these things materialised. You hear a lot of whispers within football, and I didn't know really what to believe. But I had my heart set on playing for Reading. I'd been there at the time for I don't know, 6 years or so. By the end of the 2 seasons that I'd spent Aldershot, And I felt like that was home, even though I hadn't trained at the club for 2 years. When I got back there for the following pre-season, I thought, you know what, I've done the hard work now. I've got 25 goals in my first 2 professional seasons, and I thought I'd kick on from now, which I did at the start of the season when Brendan Rodgers came in as manager. But that was quite a bit of a turbulent time with him also. Yeah, it was difficult. I started the season really well until I got caught sort of lying, being unprofessional about my whereabouts with gambling. And then I never played another match. Reading was never in another match day squad, so it was tough.
So did they find out what the issue was, or was it more the lying from their point of view?
So what it was we started off like sort of pre-season in Sweden. I got player of the tour and did really well when we came back. And one of the things that got to my head quite a lot was I remember walking past the mega store one day, something so stupid, and my name was on shirts in the front window of the mega store, and I thought, how's this happened so quickly? And that gave me sort of like a little pat on the back, I suppose. And I thought to myself, do you know what? Like, I'm doing well. We played against Chelsea and I scored a free kick against Petr Cech in pre-season the week before the season started. Made my debut against Nottingham Forest, played like Newcastle away. And I was this kid living a dream. I remember going out in the evening after the Chelsea game, and we were in a bar in London, and 2 guys come up to me and tapped me on the shoulder. And they said, was that you that scored the goal? And I turned around and Sky Sports News was showing the pre-season friendly highlights. And I was just like, yeah, it was. And I couldn't quite believe it because my life off the pitch was a mess. But I was getting away with it purely because of my ability on it. But obviously you can only do that for so long until your life becomes completely imbalanced. And to try and live the life of a gambler, be a gambling addict alongside football, they just don't go hand in hand. They don't marry up. So one day after the 4th or 5th game of the season, I got pulled into the office. And Brendan said to me, he said, listen, he said, I've seen a change. I see the players out there, players like Gylfi Sigurdsson, Shane Long, Hal Robson-Kanu that have gone on to play in European Championships and World Cups. They're here every minute of the day. You're the last one in and you're the first one out. And I used to have a date every single day, not with a nice little blonde or anything like that. I had a date with the bookmakers. All I could think about in the morning, all the whole time throughout training. As soon as training had finished, I thought to myself, do you know what? I cannot wait to get back there. It's all I could think about. And my mind was completely taken over. So I would rush to get out. And he said to me, listen, I need you to be more professional. So I sort of sat there and I nodded my head and I was like, yeah, I can be. But I knew I couldn't be. The following day, exactly the same happened. He caught me rushing out of training. And he brought me back in the following morning and said, listen, I gave you an opportunity. And I stopped him in his tracks. I told him I had the dentist and that's why I had to shoot. And he said, basically, listen, you're lying to me. I had to prove that I had the dentist and I couldn't. And off the back of that, I never played another match. I'm not saying that that was the sole reason, but it definitely didn't help. I don't even know if he'd remember that chap because for him, he's obviously worked with hundreds, thousands of players in his time. But I remember it clear as day. And for me, it's something that I think about quite a lot, just thinking, do you know what? Maybe I could have shown a sign of weakness. I opened up to him and said, listen, I'm struggling. Can you help me out? But it just wasn't the thing to do at the time. So I thought, do you know what? I'll keep it to myself and just crack on.
And from a playing point of view, what was training with Brendan Rodgers and some of those players you mentioned? Is he as good a tactician as he appears to be?
Oh, mate, he's absolutely incredible. Yeah, really, really good. The sessions were class. Loved him as a person. I felt like at the time I kind of let him down, but I look back now and I let myself down. I met up for lunch with one of my old teammates, Simon Church, about 6 months ago. And the first thing he said was, what the fuck happened to you? And I was just like, mate, I don't really know. It was a nice thing for him to say because he was obviously saying, like, listen, you started off the season absolutely flying. And I was like, yeah, I know I did. And I just said to him, listen, gambling took over my life. It was exactly that. And he was just like, was it that bad? And I said, yeah, it was. I said, it was all I did every minute of every day that I could until I ran out of money. And I'd kind of exhausted every avenue of finance. And then in the end, it just became a daily routine without even thinking about what I was going to do.
And when that period comes up with Red and Valencia, I think you joined, would have been Steve Evans probably at the time?
Yeah, what a guy. What a guy, Steve.
Yeah, you've had some characters as managers, haven't you?
Yeah. So he was very, very turbulent in his approach, his behaviour. But I look back now and I probably appreciate him more now than I should have. He gets the best out of players. He instills fear into them. He makes you work hard, and off the back of that, he actually reaps success. So you can't blame him, I suppose. I know he's like a villain pantomime to a lot of people. But he's not the world's best tactician or anything like that, but he makes you work hard and he gets you as a cohesive unit. He gets you going. He gave me one hell of a contract at Crawley. He gave me sort of like £30,000 the day I signed in League Two, which is unheard of, to be honest, at that level. I remember putting it away in a bank account. I went to pre-season in Portugal with the rest of the squad. And on the second day, he was screaming and shouting in my face when I was sat on the floor after the match. And there was spit going in my eye. Do you remember Hope Akpan? He's a Scouser.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there was, there was spit going in Hope Akpan's eyes, and he came back over to me screaming again. And I was like, Jesus Christ, like, what is going on here? So I got up and I went, fuck this, and walked off. And he was going like, where are you going? Where are you going? And I was just like, I'm going, simple as that. And he said, you better not walk away. And I carried on walking. And the team that played the first half of the match was stood down the end of the pitch, and they said, Scotty, you've got to go back. And I was like, no chance. I said, there's no way I'm going back. So I went down for dinner that evening, and he said, what are you doing? He said, you're not eating with us, you're not training with us, you're not socialising with us. He said, go back to your room. He said, tell your agent you're getting a flight home. He said, I don't want to see you again. So I was just like, oh. So I didn't expect that. So for the next 6 days, I started gambling on Danny Bullman's laptop. He's still at Crawley now. He's about 48. But I started gambling on his laptop and started to gamble some of the money I'd obviously saved up from my signing on fee that was due to buy a house. And then got back to England, started looking around houses with my parents. And I had to come clean to them that from the first bet that I had in Portugal to 15 days later, I gambled away about £31,500. So yeah, that was a turning point for me. Off the back of an argument with Steve, I wasn't allowed to train. I was isolated in my room, and boredom kicked in, isolation kicked in. So yeah, that's what I turned to. So that's one of the stories, obviously, under the time that I was playing with Crawley.
And you did go on to make a few appearances for them, didn't you? So did you sort of get back in his good books later on down the line?
We played Southend on a Monday night on Sky Sports, and he pulled me in on Sunday morning when we were training, and he sat me down, and I thought, what is going to happen here? And he said, are you ready? And I said, what do you mean? Like, am I ready? And he said, we're going to start you tomorrow night. So I was just like, right, okay. I hadn't played in a good while. And then I sat there and I thought, yeah, of course I'm ready. And I had a good run in the team after that. I think we were unbeaten in about 14 games and ended up getting promoted. So I did do quite well towards the back end of the season. Obviously went up to League One. We got promoted away at Accrington. Then the new manager came in. Got a phone call from my agent a couple of days after, and he said, I've just been on the phone to Crawley. And I said, all right, okay. And I'm thinking I was going to get a new contract. And he said, yeah, they've told me you're never going to play for the club again. And I thought, well, this is strange. Like, we've just been promoted. I've just played all the games at the back end of the season. We're halfway through pre-season. And I was like, why have they said that? What's happened here? Because I thought, who gets promoted with a club, plays all the games at the back end of the season and gets told they're never going to play again?
Yeah.
But I just kind of accepted it. I had a manager at the time, Richie Barker, who came in, and I'll be honest with you, I've seen him a few times since, but I was a complete arsehole towards him because I had no motivation to play, because I got told I wasn't going to play. So training was tough. I used to train with the youth team quite a lot. And I found that really, really difficult because I'd signed there as, I think I was the top earner and stuff like that on a good contract, to then play with the youth team on a Friday morning when the lads are travelling up to away games at Fleetwood and places like that, wherever it might have been. I found it difficult to take. So that hit me for six quite badly. And then at Christmas time, halfway through my second year of my contract, I got told that I was going to basically get paid up the rest of my contract and I was free to leave. But during my time at Crawley, I used to sleep in my car at the stadium some nights when I was training with the youth team because I couldn't afford to get home because I'd over gambled. So I didn't have the fuel, I didn't have anywhere to stay, so I was used to sleep in my car at the stadium, round the back of the 3G pitch. And it's just ludicrous to think that I used to do that, but that's what my life was like. It was quite turbulent.
And were any of your teammates starting to become aware of the problems you had, and was there any support there for you at that time, or was it just you against the world at that moment?
Do you know what? I was completely in love with gambling at the time. That's the only way I can describe it. So I started to bet on my own matches at half time, whether it was us to win, us to lose. I remember Cheltenham away one day where I'd bet on us to lose the match. I looked at the back four and I thought, do you know what? I've had bailiffs at my door this week. I need to pay a £1,500 parking fine that's increased. And I thought the only way that I can pay this debt is by betting on things that I could affect. I got pulled off at half time, 3-0 down. I ended up winning £2,000 from the game, and I look back now and think, like, what was I doing? But your rules, regulations, morals, principles go out the window when you've got an issue with gambling, and you've got debts to pay. I was so worried about the bailiffs turning up at my door again. My mum answered the door and she started crying. She thought it was the police knocking on the door 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning, basically saying that I'd snuck out of the house. She was worried that I'd gone and done something stupid because she knew that I was suffering with my mental health. So she kind of ran up to my room, burst open the door, and basically just said, like, "Thank God you're still in here." And I said, "Well, what do you mean? What do you mean by that?" She said, "Oh, we've got bailiffs at the door. I thought you'd gone out during the night and done something stupid." And I was like, "No, Mum, don't be stupid." But that just shows how worried she was at the time.
Yeah, and I suppose it seems like you had a very strong family as well, and often we see people get into these situations and they don't have anybody to fall back on. So was your relationship with your family at this point just critical to you getting back on the right track?
Yeah, listen, a lot of people think that gambling problems, issues come from broken homes, dysfunctional families, unintelligent people, selfish people. My parents are both intelligent people. They're great people. Listen, I couldn't ask for better parents. And without them, I don't know where I'd be today, to be brutally honest. They pretty much paid for me to get to training for about 7 or 8 years because I couldn't afford to put fuel in my tank. But yeah, with my mum's help, she was always willing to help me. And it was great. And then my dad basically came on board in the end and wanted to help me out because at first he couldn't quite fathom how I was spending so much money. He's so good with his finances, so for him it was unbelievable to think that I could put £500, £1,000 on a horse.
Yeah.
So I understand that looking back now, that I was different to the rest. But yeah, the support and the love they've shown me throughout all of it, and then since I've stopped gambling, listen, I'll forever be in debt for that.
And then the last sort of professional team I think you were at was Oxford, and again Chris Wilder, another brilliant manager. What was that? I think he was only there for a year, but what was that like?
Yeah, so I signed there in the February for the last sort of 10, 12 games of the season. Then I did a whole season the following year. But he was class, like just a really, really good guy. Someone that you could have a pint with. Not that I ever did, I don't think, but you could easily sort of sit there and have a chat with him, just laid back, down to earth. Listen, wasn't the best tactician in the world yet again. Wasn't the most articulate of people with words. Loved the F word. If you'd done a team talk, there'd be 85 Fs in 35 seconds. So, but what he did is create an atmosphere that was enjoyable to go to work in. To say that he'd be a top 5 Premiership manager now, Premier League manager, you'd have been laughing, I suppose. And I think he would have been laughing himself, not being horrible. But yeah, he's done what a job he's done. Manager of the year in my eyes by an absolute mile for what he's done with that team. But
yeah, absolute dream. And I must admit, I remember you as a player, as I said, supporting Tranmere. I've seen you play a few times, and we were quite surprised when we were doing the research because we couldn't really remember where you went after Oxford, and was it Dunstable Town? How
yeah,
did that? There must have been clubs in between the level you went to that would have took you.
Well, I had a conversation with Cheltenham and Northampton when I left at the end of the season, and both of the managers there had said to my agent, "Listen, we've heard he's got an issue with gambling. Is it true?" My agent rang me and said, "Like, how bad is it?" And I said, "No, it's fine." I said, "I like a bet, but no more than anyone else." But I'd got the name in the game that was a gambling addict, and no one would touch me with the proverbial barge pole. So I remember sitting in Nando's one day. Players had gone back to pre-season at professional clubs. It was about 2 or 3 weeks into pre-season, and my phone went, and I didn't recognise the number, so I picked it up. And the guy said to me, "Hello, it's Tony Fontanelle from Dunstable Town Football Club." And I thought, "What the fuck are you doing ringing me?" And yeah, that's the God's honest truth. So I thought, "What are you doing ringing me? You must have the wrong number." And he said, "Listen, I've heard you've not got a club. We'd like to have a look at you." So I thought, like, I'll come down tonight and I'll have a look at you. So I went down there that evening and I played against Hemel Hempstead Town, played well. And he said, "Listen, we want to sign you." And I thought, thank God for that. So it was unbelievable to actually kind of accept how far I dropped. My first ever match for them was in front of 87 people. And I think 6 or 7 of them were like my mates and my dad. So it just shows how basically the fall from grace was quite a far one. I remember going on the team bus for the first time, my first ever away trip, a place called Bideford Town. And when I came back, I could not quite believe the coach on the way home. People were like getting absolutely hammered. People were up to all sorts on the coach. And I thought, oh my God, what have I joined? But do you know what? It kind of got me my love for football again,
Yeah,
because it was so laid back. It didn't mean as much, but to me it did, because I loved playing football. I didn't care whether I was playing against my best mate in the garden, wherever it was. If my sister was in goal and I'm pinging balls at her, anything, any sort of football I wanted to play, I wanted to win. But I quickly sort of enjoyed playing because there was no pressure. And the thing that I enjoyed most was that I found the level quite easy. I sound like an arrogant person there, but I did find it quite easy at the time. And I'd gone from being someone who was just part of a team for the previous couple of years to being sort of like Roy the Rovers
yeah.
for an hour or two. And that was quite a nice feeling, because when you're feeling down in the dumps about how you're feeling, what's going on off the pitch, it was kind of a pick me up every Saturday, like playing in a team where you actually felt valued. So that was nice. But yeah, they stopped paying me after about 3 months. I was about 6 weeks down in wages, and I thought to myself, like, right, this is non-league football. Like, this is how it works. This is how it happens. So I needed to move on. So I ended up going to Wealdstone after that.
And that's up of that, was that Conference South at the time?
Yeah, so it was back up a level.
Yeah,
The money getting paid in the league below was crazy, really.
yeah,
But I used to climb out of the stadium on a Saturday. My dad would wait for me at the gate, and I'd give him my wages in an envelope, and he'd go and pay it into my account, because I'd moved into a house by this point. And when I gave him the envelope, it used to be really tedious. He'd open it up, give me 20 quid, and go, "Yeah, mate, go and treat yourself to a takeaway." And I'm thinking, "Oh yeah, fucking great, cheers." Like, so I used to climb over the fence into people's gardens and jump into my car and drive off, so he couldn't catch me. And I'd go down William Mill straight away, lose my money. He'd ring me up and say, "Where are you?" "I'm still waiting at the gate." This is about an hour and a half after the game's finished. I'm sat at a roulette machine. But it just shows the level of desperation to try and place those bets and basically spend the money that I was earning.
So you then do the round sort of in non-league football. You Oxford City, Chelmsford, Slough, Kingstonian. At what point does the recovery start to happen, and where was you at the time? Was you still
Yeah.
enjoying your football?
So at the end of that season with Dunstable, I went to Wealdstone. I finished off the season, and I was doing quite well there. To be fair, like the fans and that, I think I was a bit Marmite. Would watch me play. Some probably didn't, because I tried the hard thing every time. I'll shoot from the halfway line and things like that. So at the end of that season, I was in the bookmakers. My mum came into the shop, and I saw her at the door, and I thought, Jesus Christ, I need to get out of here. So I ran to the door. I said to her, "Is everything okay?" And she said, "You need to stop gambling. You're going to end up dead. You're going to break up mine and your dad's marriage." That night I went home and I didn't speak to anyone for a long period of time. Thought of sort of suicide and self-harm wasn't right, but I held a knife to my chest and I started scratching myself underneath my pec. And as soon as I did it, I thought, what am I doing? What have I become? Like, who am I? I didn't kind of recognize myself anymore. And I went round to my mum's. I said to her, "Listen, I think I finally hit my rock bottom." She said to me, "Thank fuck you finally admitted it." And that was when I knew I needed help. We sort of just stood in the living room crying. She put me in touch with a rehab clinic called Sporting Chance, which was set up by Tony Adams.
Yeah,
Following day, I went down there for an assessment. Sat there opposite this guy, like, he was ticking all these boxes with a pen, and he just looked at me with a little wry smile, and he was just like, "Yeah, you're a mess." He said, "You need 26 days worth of help," where I needed to pack my bags and move in. So 6th of July, I was driving around the M25 down the A3 to rehab. I think rehab was for only people like Amy Winehouse and Pete Doherty, not for me. I was thinking, like, how has this happened? But the way that it happened is that something that started out as a little bit of fun turned into a problem. And in the late days, it turned into an addiction, which I didn't know you could get from gambling when I first started. So when I got there, I sort of sat opposite the counsellor, and he said, "Right, tell me what's been going on." And I thought, "Mate, no way." And I thought, "No way am I telling you what I've done, what I've been up to, what I've done behind my parents' back," because I was scared of getting judged. Over the next sort of 2 or 3 days, I started to open up. I started to tell him the truth. And you know what? I kind of enjoyed it. I thought, you know what? This is actually getting me somewhere. I feel better already, because it wasn't just me that was struggling. He was a recovering gambling addict himself, and he understood me. It was almost like we were speaking Spanish to each other, and I couldn't even say hello in Spanish. So it was just brilliant. It just took all the pressure away from me. And then we did all sorts of things in rehab, like trust building. I was walking around on a Saturday morning blindfolded, leading a horse around this field. I don't know what I was doing, but it was all part of rebuilding trust exercises, meditation, Tai Chi, scuba diving, all sorts of different things. For me, it's worked. For the other 3 people that I lived with for the 26 days, sadly, they're all back doing what they were doing. But I sort of got on the horse and rode it, and I listened to everything that they said. I did everything that they wanted me to do, and I've come out the other side of it.
She was sexy, she was classy, she was sassy, she was nasty, she had the lot. So don't you hate me, don't you shame me, don't you blame me for my little sadistic lot. It's in my nature, I'm a creature, it's my feature, it is in my divine right. So don't you hate me, don't you shame me, don't you blame me for what I did, oh man.